morning to you, our dear viewer, listener. You're welcome to our 10th session of the Citizen Baraza. Like I have told you before, Baraza is Kiswahili for a public meeting. And every Friday morning we bring you different managers, heads of government programs to tell you what the government of Uganda is doing with your taxes, and also to tell you where you can find the various services of government. This morning we have a very interesting topic, something that does not leave our lips: the National Identification and Registration Authority, NIRA. So we are going to discuss the registration process in Uganda, the registration of persons process in Uganda. My name is Duncan Atigaba, and I'm going to be your host. NIRA, or National Identification and Registration Authority, was established by an Act of Parliament, the Registration of Persons Act of 2015. The purpose of the Act is to harmonize and consolidate the law on registration of persons, to provide for registration of individuals, to establish a national and identification authority, to provide for the use of national identification cards and aliens identification cards. The mandate of NIRA is to create, manage, maintain, and operationalize the National Identification Register by registering all citizens of Uganda, registering non-citizens of Uganda who are lawfully residents in Uganda, registering birth and death, and assigning a unique national identification number to every person registered. So with us this morning, to break down things for us, is Mr. Gilbert Kadilo. Mr. Kadilo is the manager for public relations and corporate affairs at NIRA. Gilbert, you're very welcome to our Baraza.
Thank you, Duncan. Thank you for hosting us here.
Yeah, so NIRA is one of the most talked about agency in this country. It is at the forefront of service delivery, delivering a very precious product called the National Identification Card, which comes with a national identification number, which now most of us need to apply for a job, to get services in hospitals, in schools, and so forth. Yeah, so we're happy to have you, and we'll get into action. There's some bit of, overlapping services. Hospitals register birth, for example, and so forth. So we'd like to know, what exactly does NIRA do? What services do you offer?
Thank you, Duncan. I think for us to have a full grasp of what a national identification system is about, and then what NIRA does, we need to go back a bit in time. Uganda as a country had, for a long period of time, never had a centralized register of persons living or residing in the country, whether citizen or non-citizen. And it was therefore difficult for us as a country to be able to identify, first and foremost, the people that we had. We had a situation where everybody could come up with whatever form of identification. People had school IDs even when they had finished university. People had LC1 IDs, people had work job IDs, name it. It was chaotic. And so from the early 2000s, government began to think through this thing and say, what do we do, one, to be able to identify the people that we have? We are conducting censuses every so many years. By the time you go out and count the number of people, analyze that data, and disseminate the report about the census, it is 5 years down the road. Since then, the population dynamics and numbers has moved on. So how do we have a system that can tell us in real time who we have in the country, be it a citizen or a non-citizen, but who is legally resident in the country? How do we at any one time know the actual or close to actual number of people that we have in this country for planning purposes? So we know we can break down and say how many women do we have, how many youth do we have, how many people under 16, how many people under this age, and so on and so forth. So that government can then use that information to plan properly and organize its services to reach the population in an efficient and effective manner. Of course, while all that was going on, an event happened in this country in 2010 that made us sit up and say, listen, we cannot delay this process anymore. And those were the terror attacks that the country suffered. And as a result of that, there was a quicker, more urgency accorded to the establishment of the National Identification Register under what we call then the National Security Information System Project, NSIS project, or what people find easier to understand, the mass registration exercise, which commenced in 2014. Of course, the other eye of government was on the ability to organize the next round of elections using this database to ensure that our democracy and our democratic processes are further strengthened. So that then the electoral roll or the register would be extracted from the National Identification Register. Important to understand and for people to draw a distinction is that at that time, NIRA did not exist as an agency of government. So mass registration started in 2014 and continued for some part into 2015. Government then sat and said, how then do we translate this mass project registration exercise into a permanent activity of government in perpetuity? And this is, I'm saying this because I want to answer the first question people keep asking. Are we still registering persons? And you wonder where some of our people are or where they live. Because for one to ask such a question, I begin to wonder, really, that you don't know that registration of persons is continuing.
Just like issuance of passports.
Absolutely.
Because travel never stops.
Absolutely. So government, in its wisdom, said, let us establish an agency that will help us to establish, maintain, operationalize, and update continuously this national identification register. First thing, importantly, the national identification register. That means somebody must register and be assigned a unique identifier. And that unique identifier is the national identification number or alien identification number for non-residents or non-nationals of Uganda, but who are legally resident in the country. Not people who come through back door. But you've come for long stay, 3 months and above, you register, you're given a an alien identification number and an alien identification card. Like a national is given a national identification number and a national identification card. So that is the thinking. So in 2015, March, the Registration of Persons Act came into being. And it is that Registration of Persons Act that outlines the mandate of NIRA. But I will go straight to the services. The services NIRA offers are, amongst others, 1, register persons and assign national identification numbers for Ugandans and alien identification numbers for non-Ugandans legally resident in the country. Now, registration and assignment of national identification numbers or NINs is ongoing. It has never stopped since NIRA commenced operations. We have not yet started registration of aliens, but we expect to be starting that soon. There have been policy and other issues for us to iron out, but it is due to start. Issuance of national identification cards and alien identification cards. Now, that is the better known part of our work. The other portion of our work is what we call civil registration. Civil registration includes birth registration and death registration. It also includes registration of marriages, but for now, registration of marriages sits with the Uganda Registration Services Bureau. We also certify adoption orders. So somebody goes to court, adopts a child or applies to adopt a child, court issues what they call an adoption order. That adoption order is brought to NIRA. NIRA registers it and issues a certificate for that adoption order for you to formally adopt this child and claim.
Yes, so if I'm
Yes.
Ugandan,
Yes.
of course I'm Ugandan, I have a registration, I have a name and a card, and I'm adopting this child. So if I bring this certificate from the court to NIRA,
the order, so NIRA registers this child now as your
as
adopted.
my adopted child.
Yes.
So
that certificate is issued for this child as your adopted child. Yes. So, of course, we also issue certificates for birth and deaths. Now, the function of registration of births and deaths, or civil registration, initially was under URSB before NIRA came into being. And before that, under other entities. Why was birth and death registration moved to NIRA? Because for you to have a complete national identification register, you have to have an end-to-end system. Global best practice indicates that a complete national identification register starts with the registration of events of birth. and ends with the registration of events of death. So your birth registration brings you into the system. Registration of the event of your death gets you out of the system. So you're terminated and we know you've left us. You're no longer active, an active part of the population. The national ID is a midpoint service. But because as a country we had our unique circumstances and interests at the time of commencement of this exercise, we started with the midpoint, that is the national ID. First to identify the adult population. But later on, the law consolidated the two receival registration and NID under one entity to be able to have that cyclical, real-time updated, national identification system. That is the dream. So those are the services that we offer as NIRA. Now, in your opening remarks, you talked about hospitals registering, NIRA registering. No, the law changed all that. Registration of events of birth and death are done by NIRA. The whole process is threefold. The first step is what we call notification. The second step is what we call registration. The final step is certification of the event. So what the law now says is that the health facilities notify NIRA. Health facilities, or even you, the parent of the child, you notify that I, Duncan Bigaba, and my wife have today had a baby, and this is the information in respect of that baby. So that notification can come through the health facility to NIRA, or you can initiate it as the parent of the child. You notify NIRA. We also recognize that there are events of birth and death that happen in communities. And that is why we provide that the sub-county chief can also notify NIRA. Of course, based on information gathered from their localities by the VHTs and other such structures, compiled and provided to the sub-county. So as NIRA, because of that, we have gone ahead and provided the necessary materials to all these points for purposes of notification.
And that's what exactly I was going to ask. Yeah, because if I am, in Mkono, maybe some place, health center place,
yeah,
and my wife has given birth.
Yes.
So at this particular point, the health tray, does NIRA have some form that I should fill?
The forms are...
Not everybody has, resources to move to Kololo or
no, the district. You do not have to move to Kololo. Once, note that the health facilities record all events of birth that happen within their jurisdictions. They have records of that. So they translate these records into notifications, which notifications are then sent to NIRA. Now, the beauty of it is that UNICEF has supported us to link electronically over 200 hospitals and health facilities across the country through what we call the Mobile Vital Records System. They've linked the health facilities to NIRA. So the health facilities can actually send that information electronically to NIRA for us to receive. So once the notifications come through, then NIRA registers that event and has it in the national identification system. Then now we wait for you as a parent to say, now I want the certificate for my child. So you come to NIRA and process a birth certificate. What used to be called birth certificates issued by the gombololas and the health facilities, for as long as they are there, they are now referred to as notification records. They are not certificates. So you cannot adduce that anywhere and say, I have this as a birth certificate. No. So certificates for events of birth and death are only issued by NIRA after the registration of the birth. We have gone ahead to make provision for online notification for people who have access to internet. You can actually go online under www.nira.go.ug, go to our services and initiate the process of notification of the event of a birth or a death, depending on which one you are looking for, and we shall recognize that and register it and go ahead and process for you a certificate as you might require. So those are the services that we offer as an institution. Please.
Yeah, so if a child is born, is there like a minimum age at which they should be registered, or even a 1 day old baby can be registered, or you say they should be 1 year old?
Our preference is that the events of birth are registered immediately. So even a baby born today can have their birth registered today. By law, immediacy means within 30 days of a birth. But because the system had not yet picked up, you have a lot of delayed registrations, now what we call late registration of events of birth, because they have gone beyond the stipulated time frame. But we still do register them and issue the necessary certification for that purpose. What we want to do now is to capture as many as possible of the children aged between 0 and 5 as possible. Because once we have those on board, then we will have dealt with a significant proportion of the unregistered population in the country.
Okay, so let's move to some of the hottest issues around the NIRA. The mass registration exercise started in 2014. I was lucky, I was registered then, and I got my national ID right away. But some people have been unfortunate. You're now talking 7 years down the road, some people have not received their cards. What happened?
I cannot say for a fact, because you see, what happened in the mass registration exercise was that a significant proportion of the population was registered. And a significant proportion of that registered population actually received their national identification cards. Truth be told, to date, we are saying that over 19 million, close to 20 million national IDs have been printed and either issued or are pending issuance. And this is for the population of the country that is eligible for national IDs, i.e. age 16 and above. So when you say we need to be very particular about statistics here, the correct information. Not everybody is entitled to a national ID. So national IDs are for people age 16 and above. Now, As you will expect, when you have an exercise like the mass registration exercise, like I said, NIRA was not there at the time. You have a mass registration exercise bringing together millions of people for purposes of registration. A lot of data is going to be gathered. There are a number of things that could happen. One, some people's data was never processed. It's a possibility. We are able to check and establish, was your data actually imported for processing? Yes or no? And we shall be able to tell you that your information is missing, and will advise you to reinitiate the process of registration. At the same time, it is a fact that we have so many uncollected cards from as far back as 2014, seated in our various offices across the country. Now, when you go on the ground and you try to establish why these cards remain uncollected, you have a number of reasons. There are people who may have passed on. There are people who since that time relocated to other parts of the country. On a number of occasions when we've conducted issuance exercises, you randomly call a few people and somebody tells you, yeah, I'm in Sudan, I'm doing business. Maybe when I come back, I'll come and pick it. And so on and so forth. Others, the women folk get married, they move to other locations and they are not able to go back to them. So the dynamics are quite incredible. Now, each case has to be handled case by case. There are even people who picked those cards physically. I don't know what happened, but it looked like in some situations, people picked cards and went and looked for friends and said, I have your card here, pick it, take it.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So people who picked their cards physically, but have never had it completely issued from the system using biometrics. Now, if you've not done that, that card will never be functional. That is why you hear there are people who claim NIRA has given fake IDs. No. When you do a check, you find that this person's card is actually pending issuance in the system. And yet the person has the physical card with them. So it is a process of identifying these issues and trying to find solutions to them, often painstakingly on a case-by-case basis as they come up.
Yeah, so what is your advice for people who, received their cards through the illegal means? Because if a friend picks for you your card, that's not illegal. It has not been signed off. The process is not complete. So what do you advise? Do they return the cards and you...
No, you don't return the card. You can complete the process. You can complete the process. What I would advise for such individuals in such situations to do, find the nearest NIRA office. Okay? Find the nearest NIRA office, introduce the matter. The officers will be able to identify and say this card is pending issuance, right? And once you know that it is pending issuance, then the onus is on you to go to the point where the registration was done, because that is where the data goes. Data comes from the kit, which is that equipment where you put your fingerprints. Comes to Kololo, is processed, and that data goes back to that same kit. That is the trail that we follow. So you will have to find time and move to the district where you registered from and go have that process completed so that your card is activated and you can use it. Otherwise, without doing that, you can never use it to access services because it will never be validated.
So viewers and listeners, please, you have heard, if you have a card which you have been calling fake and accusing NIRA of issuing fake cards, that is very wrong. Go to the nearest, have this issue rectified. They just need to capture your fingerprint. Yeah, so Gilbert, the issue of learners, right now there's a group of students who are trying to join university. And some universities are actually asking for national identification numbers. And we had a mass learners registration exercise in 2017, but they have not received their names. How, how is that?
Yes, we had the learners registration exercise in 2017. Out of that exercise, we registered approximately 9.5 million learners in schools. As I speak, over 7 million, close to 8 million, have had their information processed successfully and NINs assigned. I want to emphasize again here that not all learners registered were supposed to receive national IDs. And this is information we have put out there severally. Only learners aged 16 years and above at the time were to receive national IDs. However, all registered learners who were successfully processed were assigned national identification numbers or NINs. As NIRA, what we did then was to send these national identification numbers to our various district offices under which the schools fell. Two, we endeavored to send these NIN lists to the schools where these learners were. We also endeavored to send lists of learners who had not been successful, indicating why their applications had not been completed, to the schools. So that information is there. However, we recognize that there has been a gap in information, and we are doing we are initiating other action to address that. One, we are reinforcing through the local area MPs and giving them these lists, indicating how many learners in their districts by school were registered, how many were successful, how many were not, and why. We are also now working through the higher institutions of learning, universities, to establish desks at those institutions. One, to be able to provide information to that category that may already have NINs but don't know about them, but also to facilitate registration for those who have never registered but are due to join university. Those initiatives are ongoing already. We have had a lot of success with UCU Mukono as we look to expand to the other universities. Now, for learners or children who registered under the Learners Project but were not yet 16, but have since made the age of 16, they are required to go through a process they call Get First ID. The ID is not automatically printed for you when you make age 16. You prompt the process by initiating a process called Get First ID. And that process is to tell us, look, I registered, I have my national identification number, but I'm now 16 and I am eligible for a national ID. So then we shall take you through that process and go ahead and print for you the physical national identification number. Yes.
Yeah, I actually saw your executive director meeting with the leadership of Uganda Christian University.
Yes.
I think it's a very timely intervention to take these services to the universities, because that's where most of the people who are coming of age who need your services. Really. Yeah, so the other issue is, I've seen complaints of people regarding some of the services, and the complaint is that some of your services are not yet online. So which services are online, and when must someone come into your office?
There's a process to make services available online. Like I hinted earlier, birth and death notification services are already available online. National ID registration services are not yet available online, partly because we are technically still trying to work with NIRA to see how best this can be done. The forms that we use for registration for national ID, for instance, have barcodes on them. So if you're going to put those forms online, how do you ensure that you are able to verify such a document or such an application? But suffice it to say that incrementally we are looking at how best to make our services available online, especially the first registration for national identification services. But birth and death notification services are already available online, and people can access them there. There are certain other functions or information that somebody can quickly get online, like confirmation of information. If, for instance, you have registered and your NIN is out, but the physical ID is not yet ready, we have an interim measure that we provide for clients. And that is what they call the confirmation of letter of confirmation of information, which says that this person, Duncan Abigaba, registered with us. The card is not yet ready, but the NIN is this, date of birth is that, the full name is ABCDE. So you can produce that letter for purposes of accessing services either in a bank or driving permit or passport or whatever you, as we wait for that service is available online fully. So you don't have to now walk to any of our offices to generate or to request for a letter of confirmation of information. You can do it online and go ahead and access whatever service. There are things like confirmation of NINs, which you can do online, or tracking the status of your application. That can be done online. You don't have to physically walk to our office. We have a phone application, *216#, where you can go. Yes.
Which networks?
All networks. Across networks. Key in that code, select, you'll see a drop-down menu, pick the service that you want, and feed in the information, and you'll get the responses that you are looking for. So all these are initiatives that we have put in place to try and make it easier for the people to access the services. But of course, ours is a country with a big digital divide. There are those that can go online, but there are still many, many more out there. The vast majority cannot go online. So for that purpose, they can visit our offices. We have 117 offices across the country. There are 5 NIRA offices in Kampala. Okay? Excluding Kololo, there are 5. Each of the divisions of Kampala has an office. And another 112 offices in other parts of the country.
That was actually going to be my next question. The decentralization of services. Yeah, so how far has it gone? It's good you're mentioning this process. So should we say that at least every district has a NIRA office?
Of course, not every district You are aware that there are over 140 districts currently in existence. Ours are 112 offices currently operational. I don't know whether we shall be granted the resources to be able to expand and cover the entire range of districts in the country, but that discussion is ongoing. At every burial in this country that happens, your area LC1 chairperson or their representative is present.
That's true.
So in some form, it is the local authority actually endorsing, you might call it that, that this function can proceed, right? So that is the principle behind the burial permit. Now, the other matter of whether to bury on Mondays or Sundays or only at the weekends, that one we have not gone is on the record. And by law, by the way, these events are a must to be registered. I think as a country we have gone a bit slow on some of these enforcement, but the provision is there that all such events of birth and death must be registered by law.
Thank you so much, Gilbert Kadilo. Our viewers, listeners, we are still here with the Manager, Public Relations and Corporate Affairs, National Identification Registration Authority. We are getting into a session where you can ask your view, or rather ask your question or give your view or make a comment for the next 20 or so minutes. So from me, I want to thank you so much for joining us. This has been our 10th session of the Baraza. Continue to follow GCIC. You can get in touch with us on WhatsApp 0414670288 or send your query on citizen@gcic.go.ug. Follow the conversation, hashtag GCIC Baraza. Follow the account GCIC Baraza. The conversation continues on Twitter. Thank you so much. My name has been Duncan Agala.
Thank you, Duncan. Thank you for this opportunity for us to share information with the public out there. We are happy that we've been given this opportunity. And as NIRA, we are ready to come back as and when we need to provide more information to our people. Please count on us to respond to your call when there are issues for us to address in the interest of improved service to our public. Thank you.